done. So these are the things. Okay. These are the things that we discussed in the last session. We are understanding about what is dependence injection, what is dependency lookup. And we also discussed about what is called inversion of control. Okay. I told you inversion of control is one design principle. Inversion of control is one design principle. Now, this design principle can be implemented by using a design pattern. So, who is a design pattern? Dependency injection is one design pattern. Dependency lookup is also another design pattern through which we can able to implement this IOC design principle. Okay. So, in dependency injection, what happens, and in dependency lookup, what happens? Okay, right? So, in a dependency injection, what happens, and in dependency lookup, what happens, we have discussed. What happens in dependency injection? The framework or the container will create both a dependent object, dependency object, and also injects the dependency object to the dependent object. Right, okay? Generally, in a dependency injection, the dependent object is going to use interface of the dependency object because to provide loose coupling between the objects. Okay. And whereas in case of dependency lookup, what happens? Container creates the dependent object and dependency object, but it does not inject the dependent object to the, okay, it is not going to inject the dependency object to the dependent object. Who should look up for that object? Dependent object only will look up or will search for its dependency object. Are able to follow me now? It is going to look for the dependency object. So this is called dependency lookup, which means dependent object, dependency object, both are created by the container only, but container does not inject the dependency object to the dependent object. That is called dependency lookup. Okay. In Spring, the container is implemented with which design pattern? Dependency injection. So means in Spring framework, who will create the dependent object and the dependency object? Spring container will create. Spring container will create the dependent object and also the dependency object, and also injects the dependency object to the dependent object. So dependence injection will be taken care by Spring container. Good. So we are going to discuss more things about this today. Okay, right? See, what I'm trying to say is that, okay, what I'm trying to say that, for example, this is the container. In Spring, this is called Spring container. Means this is a container object, Spring container. And you know, this is Spring container creates, for example, dependent object. Now this is Spring container only creates what object also? Dependency object. So who is creating both these objects? Container. So container creates what object? Dependent object. Container also creates what object? Dependency object. And at the same time, what container only will do now? The container only will inject the dependency object to the dependent object. I'm just writing one arrow injects. So what is container doing now? Container injects this dependency object to the dependent object. This is called what? Dependency injection. What happens in dependency lookup? So in a dependency lookup, the container is not going to inject the This dependency object to the dependent object. What happens now here? Container only responsible for creating the objects, but not responsible for injecting the objects. Now, in this case, in dependency lookup, what is going to happen now? This dependent object only explicitly is going to retrieve the dependency object. It is going to look up for the, it is going to look up for the its dependency object, and it will get the object. It is going to look up for the object, will get the object. This is called what type of design pattern? Dependency lookup. So your container responsibility is only what? Creating the objects. What and what objects? Dependent object and the dependency object. But the container is not responsible for injecting what? The dependency object to the dependent object. So the dependent object only will explicitly look up for its dependency object, and then it is going to get the dependency object. Are you able to get my point now, right? So this is called dependency lookup design pattern, right? So in case of dependency injection, so dependent object is no need to look up for the dependency object. Okay, who will automatically inject this, automatically injects this dependency object to this dependent object? The container will inject it. Okay, now this is called dependency injection. Right. Let's have both these diagrams also corresponding to these points. Sorry. Let me add the two diagrams into the document, and then I'm going to talk about how to write the Spring configuration file. All such kind of things. See, what we are discussing here, our intention is we want to know about the diagram for both of them. What I'm trying to say, there is container. Let's say that there is a container. Let's assume that this guy is container. This is called container in Spring. Spring container. Let's say this is container. Okay. Now, just now what I told, this container is creating what and what objects? This container is creating the dependent object. This container is creating the dependent object. And this container is also creating what object? Dependency object. It is creating the dependent object and also the dependency object. Now it is creating both the dependent object and the dependency object. Both objects are created by the container. Let's say the container is creating, okay, let's say the container is creating both these objects. The container is creating both these objects. The container is creating both these objects. Okay, container is creating both these objects. I'll write the names now. And who will inject who will inject the dependency object to the dependent object? Container. Container. Now what container is doing now? Container is injecting the container is injecting the dependency object to the dependent object. So now we are writing the statements required. Now we are calling this object as a dependent object. We are calling it as a dependent object. Okay, we'll arrange it. Dependent object. Okay, we can see that. Okay, now this object is called what type of object? Dependency object. This is called what type of object? Dependency object. So we have two objects called what and what now? Dependent object and dependency object. And now container is creating those objects. Container creates, okay, container creates this object. Which object? Okay, container creates which object? Okay, container creates the dependent object. Container creates the dependent object. Okay, let's say Okay, container creates a dependent object. Okay, and container creates what object also? Dependency object. Who is creating the dependent object and dependency object? Container. So container creates a dependent object and also creates a dependency object, and also will perform injection. Injects. Let's say injects. So who is injecting? Who is injecting? Container. What container is doing now? Injecting. Injects what object to what object? Injects the container injects dependency object to the dependent. This is called what type of design pattern? Dependency injection. Dependency injection I'm writing here. Okay. Very good. Now we are going to talk about almost same kind of diagram, that is called dependency lookup. Dependency lookup. Right. Now tell me, the dependency lookup, container does not inject what? Container does not inject the dependency object to the dependent object. Okay. Now what dependent object will do now? Dependent object, okay, is going to look up for the it is going to look up for the dependency object, and it is going to get the dependency object. Okay, here container responsibility is only for creating the objects but not injecting the dependencies. It is going to look up and then it is going to get it. It will look up and it will get it. Okay, this is called what type of design pattern? Dependency lookup. Dependency lookup. So both the things, I just want to copy it into your document as well for your reference. Okay. Now next we are going to discuss more things today. Let's have the discussion. Okay, that's enough. So far we have discussed these things in the last class: IOC, dependency injection, dependency lookup. And coming to today's session. Today, our intention is what? Before we start our discussion with the Spring Boot and then with microservices, first of all, everybody should have the very good knowledge on Spring Basics. And Spring Basics are also called a Spring Core module. Okay, right. So in the Spring Core module, first you need to understand about two objects called what and what: dependency injection and dependency lookup. You also need to understand what is called IOC. First of all, who is called a dependent object and who is called dependency object. What is called a tight coupling between objects and what is called loose coupling between objects. So that's why I started my discussion and I'm talking about all these kind of things before we are just preparing our ground to enter into the Spring framework. Right? Now coming to the point. When you are working with the Spring, okay, we are responsible for creating the classes with all the required functionalities. But object creation and managing the objects, that is totally taken care by Spring Container. And that's why it is called inversion of control. Okay. So earlier, I mean, in the last session, I gave diagram. Earlier, classes are developed by programmer, and even managing creating the objects and managing the objects for the classes, everything will be taken care by programmer. Now, okay, now with introduction to Spring Framework, what happened in Spring Framework now? Okay, what happened in Spring Framework now? The responsibilities are inverted. Okay, previously without inversion of control, developer is writing the classes, developer is creating the objects, developer is also managing the objects. But with the with introduction to IOC, inversion of control design principle, then developer is only responsible for writing the classes, and the container will take care of what creating the objects and managing the objects. These are all will be taken care by which container? Spring container or Spring framework, otherwise we can say, or Spring container will take care of it. Am I clear with that? Okay, good. Now we are going to understand how we can tell the container that, see, I'm a developer. I'm a developer. As a developer, what I'm doing now, I'm writing classes. As a developer, I'm responsible for developing the classes. So I'm writing all the classes in my project, whatever the classes are required with whatever the methods required, and I'm implementing all the methods, the required functionalities, everything I'm writing. Because as a developer, whatever the functionalities are required in my project, I'm just going to implement it. But after that, who is going to create object and manage those objects? Container. That's called Spring container. Correct? Very good. Who is Spring container? I'll talk about that. First of all, the question is now, how does container know that? How does container know that these are the classes I have developed in the project? And how does container know that this is the dependent object and this is the dependency object? Am I right or not? Which means, as a programmer, apart from writing our classes, we also need to write one more additional file called as configuration file. One more additional file we need to write called configuration file. Okay, try to understand now. Configuration file we need to write. Sorry, what that configuration file will contain? That configuration file will contain the information whichever is required for the container for creating the objects and managing the objects. Okay, so we should provide details to the container. So when we provide the details to the container by writing in a file, then the container will read that file. Then container will understand. Okay, understand what are the dependent classes, what are the dependency classes, and what are the independent classes. Okay, so how does container know about all the classes that are developed by you as a developer? So you have to provide that information to the container. How do you provide that information to the container? By writing that information in the file. In which file? Configuration file. That configuration file is an XML file. Is what file? XML file. Right, okay, good. So XML file means it is one structured file. We can't just write like a MS Word document. We can't write like MS Word document or like a notepad file, and we cannot tell the container because they are not structured files. In notepad, I can write in my way. You can write in your way. Right? In MS Word document text file, MS Word document also, you can write in your own way, I can write my own way, because they don't follow any structure. Do you have any proper structure for preparing the document in MS Word? You can follow your own structure, I can follow my own structure. Notepad also same thing. That's why what type of the file is required to provide the information in a structured format? XML file. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. XML file. Earlier, when Spring Framework started, the information is provided to the container through XML file. To the containers, if any information need to be supplied, okay, we should supply in a structured format. Okay, right? So who is that structured file? XML file. XML is a one structured document. That's why XML files are created for sending the information to the container. Okay, right? So this is in Spring. In a servlet technology also, what generally we have to do, we have to write the configuration of the servlet class in a web.xml file. Okay. So what is the reason why we are writing in the file called web.xml? That is also to provide the information to the container in a structured format. In a structured format. That's why we are writing XML file. If somebody asks, tell me why are you writing? You are all developing classes, then why are you writing XML file again? What is the purpose of writing the XML file? That is to provide some information to the container. Container needs some information. If you are not providing the container about who is the dependent class, who is the dependency class, right? And who is the independent class. If you don't provide all this information, then container don't know. Okay, container don't know who is a dependent object and who is dependency object, and container cannot inject any dependency object to the dependent object. We should provide all these details to the container. How do we provide all these details to the container? We are going to provide the information by writing in a file called XML file. So that is called Spring configuration file. Okay. Initially, when Spring Framework started, we have only XML. The only one way to provide the information to the container is XML file. Everybody get my point? Right. Good. Later on, what happened in Spring Framework, and of course in the entire Java implementation, Java application development, annotations are introduced. What are introduced? Annotations. Annotations. Now alternatives came. What's the alternate now? Okay, you can write in XML file. You can write the configuration in XML file. Otherwise, you can also do configuration with the annotations. By using annotations also, you can tell the information. By using what also? Annotations also. Okay, so XML is one way, annotations is the other way. Are you able to follow me? XML is one way, annotations is the other way. So first initially, nowadays we don't write any XML configuration file. And moreover, when you are working the Spring Boot and microservices, Spring Boot with microservices and microservices does not allow XML configurations. It does not allow XML only what what type of configurations are allowed? Annotations based configuration only allowed. We cannot write the XML files there. Are you able to get my point? Very good. Try to understand now. But we are just starting our beginning with Spring Framework. So that's why even I am also not talking much about XML, but at least for 1-2 applications to get an idea that this is how the XML files are going to look like. We are going to start our journey with XML only first. Our first applications are going to use 1-2 applications. We are going to work with XML only. Are you getting my point now? Right. Good. Try to understand now. After once XML, you got an idea. Okay. Then next we are going to start working with the annotations. So what are important for you actually to learn before we start with Spring Boot? Annotations only. Annotations only how to learn. Okay. First, you should know about all the annotations. After that, you can start with the Spring Boot journey. Okay, right? That's what Spring core module, and with annotations you need to learn. Good. But initially, I am going to start with what file only? XML file only. For first 1-2 applications, we are going to discuss our code with the XML file. Then later on, we are going to start with the annotations, and we are going to complete all annotations available in the Spring framework. Okay, then we are going to enter into Spring Boot. So here only it will take much time. Then after that, once we enter into Spring Boot, then we can happily start our journey. No issue in that. Okay, let's start with it. And coming to the point, that is what called as Spring configuration file. So today I'm going to talk about something called as what file? Spring configuration file. Spring configuration file. So actually, this is XML file. So we should write clearly. Spring configuration file is what file? XML file. So we should write very carefully. If you do any mistake in the XML file, you will get a lot of exceptions. That's why it's a bit complicated. That's why what happened? Slowly, annotations are introduced into the programming. Into Java to reduce the use of XML, XML annotations are introduced. Okay, right. What is annotation? We'll discuss at the time of annotations, I will tell you. Okay, right. So first we are understanding about something called as what file? Spring configuration file. Okay. So what is Spring configuration file? Currently it is an XML file. It is an XML file. Okay, why we should write this configuration file? Okay, to provide information to whom? Container. To provide the information to the container about our classes. About our classes. Our classes in our project are called Spring Beans. Whatever the classes we are developing in our project, they are all called as Spring Beans. Okay, they may be Java Bean classes or Pojo classes. That's why in the very first session only I told about what is Pojo and what is Java Bean. They may be Pojo classes or Java Bean classes, but we are calling them as what? Simply Spring Beans. Our classes in the project are called Spring Beans. Okay, right? Our classes are called Spring Beans. So we are going to provide information about our classes to the Spring container. Right. Good. So how to write this XML file? That's what we need to understand here. So some basic things is whenever you are writing any XML file, do remember that every XML file is going to contain one root element. Every XML file is going to contain one root element. Okay. For the entire XML file, root element is only one. One root element will be there. Element name can be anything. Element means we are going to keep within less than and greater than, like HTML. One root will be there. Inside the root, parent can be there. Inside the root, parent can be there. This parent can be repeated many times, no problem. Okay, right? And these are all called as a tags actually. Now this is root tag. This is called parent tag. Every tag must have close. Every tag has a start and end. Start and end, begin and start end. Okay, right? Good. This is parent. Under parent, there can be child tags. There can be child tags. When you're writing the Spring configuration file, the root tag is called beans. And moreover, XML is case sensitive. Unnecessarily don't write uppercase. Unnecessarily don't use uppercase letter. It is case sensitive. And when you're writing any tag names, remember all the tag names are in XML are in lowercase only. So what is the root tag here? Beans. Beans. Parent tag is bean. Parent tag is what? Bean. And this tag has multiple attributes, but the two attributes that we use frequently are called ID and class. Attributes are separated with a white space. Of course, to indicate it's a white space, I have taken much white space. But one white space is at least required. Class. Class. This is called bean tag. This tag has attributes called what? ID and class. And this is the parent tag, let's say. Now I'm going to close it. Inside the parent tag, there could be child tags. I'll talk about what are the child tags later, but currently I'm talking about this. Okay. Now, one bean means one class. It may be dependent class or dependency class, but you are going to configure it as a bean only. Right. Next. Suppose two beans you created, means two classes you have created. Two classes created means you have to configure as two beans, na? Bean. Every bean has a unique ID and also has class. Like this, you can repeat multiple times. And finally, you have to close a root tag. Who is the root tag? Beans. The tag names are always in lowercase. The attributes names are always in lowercase. This is the name of the attribute, ID. Another attribute name is class. They are all in lowercase. Okay, are you getting my? So tag names, attributes names, they are always in lowercase, not in uppercase. What is the root tag of writing this configuration file? Beans. Beans. Okay. What should be the name given to this XML file? I have written one XML file like this. Now tell me what is the name I have to keep here? This is the question, right? So name is your choice. What name you have to provide for this file? Your name.xml. Whatever the name that you want, you can give. Extension is what? .xml. For example, I am writing config.xml. For the name I am giving config.xml. Okay, right. I can give config.xml, or if you want any other name, you can give. Sir, I don't want config.xml. I want to give some other name.xml. Okay, we can give. No problem. Whatever the name that we want, there is no issue in writing the name of the file. Name of the file could be any name. It is not like a web application development like web.xml. Here the file name can be any name. Your choice. Spring configuration file name can be any name. For example, I'm writing ashokit.xml. No problem. It is correct. It's correct. Or I want to write this file name as beans.xml. Okay, no problem. You write. Are you able to follow me now? Am I clear with the point now? So what should be the name given to this file? No, any name.xml. What the name should be given? Any name.xml. Name is your choice, beans or config or application or any other name. Extension is only what dot? XML. XML. Okay. Now coming to the other information. Some information required here. Here, ID. We know who is going to load all this information. Means who is going to read all this information? Container. Spring container. Right? Well, Spring container is reading all the information from this XML file. For every bean, container is going to create object. Bean means what here? Class. Who is going to create object for the class? Container. Now you tell me all the objects are there in the container only. Let's assume that this is called what? Container. Tell me in the container, all the objects are available here. So who is creating all these objects? Container. But how to identify this object? By using its ID. ID is a unique name. ID is to identify the object. It's a unique. ID is to identify the object. For example, this object ID is ID1. It is ID2. This is ID3. For example, this is class A. This is class B. This is class C. For example. So how to identify this object? How to identify the class A object in the container? By using its ID. By using its ID. Okay. ID is to uniquely identify the object. To uniquely identify the object, we are going to use what? ID. ID. Okay, na? Right. So ID is mandatory. In place of ID attribute, later on what happened in Spring next versions, currently we are working the Spring 6.x version, but versions and all I'll tell you later. In place of ID attribute, instead of ID, you can also use name attribute. What you can use? Name attribute. Initially, actually ID attribute is given in the Spring very old version. Later, we can also have another alternate called what? Name. Either I can use an ID attribute or name attribute. Bean ID. Okay. So every bean in the container, every bean means I can say every object in the container should be identified with a unique name, and that name is called ID. Okay. At the time of writing the XML file, you can use either ID attribute or name attribute. For example, I am writing a sample configuration like this. For example, I am writing a sample configuration like this. Assume that only. See, for example, I am writing my file name as config.xml. Assume that, okay? Assume that what? I have a config.xml. Tell me what is the root tag of writing this XML? What is the root tag to write this XML file? Beans. Beans. Who is a parent tag? Obviously, bean. Bean has what attributes? ID and class. In place of ID, we can also write what? Name. Name. We can write either ID or name. For example, I'm writing bean ID is equal to, I want to use ID only. Bean ID. Are you able to get my point, right? Bean ID. For example, I'm writing ID. For example, ID is travel. For example, ID is travel. Class. Class is, let's say, for example, com dot fully qualified name, pack dot. This is my package name. Com dot pack is my package name. Com dot pack dot travel class. Travel. Just for example, I'm writing. Of course, inside this some tags we need to write. I'll tell you what to write. Now this is called what tag? Bean. Okay, right? Next, I want to start adding one more, bean. Let's say ID equals to car. ID can be any name. Class equals to com dot pack dot car. For example, I'm writing next one more bean tag. And here I'm writing ID is equal to bike. Now class is equal to com dot pack dot bike. Close the bean tag and finally close the beans tag. Am I clear now? Right. So tell me, what is the ID I gave here? Travel. You can give T also. So just I'm writing a meaningful name. Otherwise, I can give ID is a T, ID is a C, ID is a B. You can write like that. ID can be any name, any meaningful name. That's it. Are you able to get my point now? It could be one letter or multiple letters, or T1, T2, T3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So just you need to follow Java identifier rules. That's it. Okay. For example, I'm writing ID is equal to 1 is error. Okay. It's an error because ID identifier should not start with a digit. You can start with underscore, but you can't start with a digit. Just small rules you need to follow, nothing more. And no need to learn an entire XML nowadays. Just get an idea of it. This is how we are going to add the configuration file. What could be the name of this file? Either config.xml or any other name.xml. It doesn't matter. Now this is travel, this is car, this is bike. So as per our example, travel is one class. As per our discussion, travel is one class, car is one class, bike is another class. But car and bike, both the classes are implementing from an interface called what? Vehicle. So I have configured the travel. I have configured the travel class. I also configured the car class. I have already configured the bike class. But vehicle interface, I have not configured. Because in the XML file, we cannot configure the interface. By using this tag, bean tag, we have to configure only the classes, but not the interfaces. Vehicle is a class or interface. For interface, you should not configure in the XML file. Only what you need to configure in the XML file? Classes only you need to configure in the XML file, but not the interfaces. Under bean tag, there are some child tags are going to come. I'm going to tell you constructor -arg tag, property tag, like this. I'm going to talk about the child tags of this bean tag. Those child tags I'll talk about this. Okay, right? But first you need to get some idea about how to write what file? Spring configuration file. What is the root tag of writing this? Beans. Okay, who's the parent tag? Bean. Okay, each bean means every bean tag represents what? One class. One class. It could be dependent class or dependency class or independent class, but it is going to represent what? One class. Okay, right? And in the bean tag, what are the attributes we must provide? ID and class. Class means what? Fully qualified class name. Fully qualified class name means what? Including the package name. That's called fully qualified class name. For example, I'm saying that scanner. We all know that scanner is a class. Okay, we all know that scanner is what? Class. Scanner is class. Scanner is class. We know scanner is a class, right? What is the fully qualified name of scanner class? Java.util.scanner. What is java.util? Package name. Scanner is class name. If you write package name dot class name, it is going to become fully qualified class name. Travel is what? Class name. But com.pack is what? Package name. So what is the fully qualified class name? Package name dot class name. This is a package name. This is a class name. Package name dot class name is going to become what? Fully qualified class name. Fully qualified class name. So class name must be fully, for the class attribute, we must provide the fully qualified class name. Not just the class name, fully qualified class name. ID can be anything. Okay. Let us add all these statements. Good. You got some information. And next, I'm going to tell you who is that Spring container. First of all, I want to add some statements for so far discussion what we made. Okay. Our discussion is a Spring configuration file. So what I told in the Spring configuration file, guys. Okay. As a programmer, we need to provide necessary details. As a programmer, we need to provide necessary details. We need to provide the necessary we need to provide the necessary details to the Spring container to create the objects and manage the objects. As a programmer, we need to provide the necessary details to Spring container to create the objects and manage the objects. Are you able to follow me now? Very good. We need to provide the necessary details to the Spring container to create the objects and manage the objects. Okay, let's start working with it. Let's start. So coming to the point. Yeah. The details can be provided to the container by creating what file? An XML file. This is called a configuration file. It's called what file? Configuration file. First of all, everybody is having a doubt called what is the meaning of word configuration? It's a very small sorry. It's a very small doubt we have in our mind. What's the doubt? We always use a word called configuration. What is the meaning of configuration? Okay. Configuration means very simple. If you are writing about your class in any other file, if you are writing the details of your class in some other file or in some other place, it is called the word configuration. It is called the word called what? Configuration. Okay. I repeat again. If you are writing the information about your class, or if you are writing about information about your class in some other place, then we are saying that what? It is called the word configuration. So tell me, your class information, like what's the class name and many other details we are going to write. Where are you writing all this information? You are writing all this information into another file now. Who is that another file? XML file. That's why we are calling the word called what? Configuration. That's why we are using a word called what? Configuration. Right. Okay. So configuration means what generally? What is the meaning of the word configuration? What is the meaning of the word configuration? We are just providing the details of our class in another file or another place. It is called the word configuration. So in which file we are going to write the information? XML file. XML file. Okay. The details can be provided to the container by creating an XML file. This is called configuration file. Okay. What should be the name of the XML file? Any name. The XML file name can be any name.xml. XML file name can be any name.xml. Extension must be what is the extension? .xml. Okay. The root element of this XML is XML file is beans. And parent tag in that XML bean. Okay, root tag is what? Beans. Parent tag is what? Bean. Bean. Okay, could be any name.xml. Okay, next. So who will read all the information from this XML? Container. And who will take care of creating the objects? Container. Who will take care of injecting the objects? Container. Okay, right. So when you're writing this XML file, bean tag, what are the two important attributes we are going to add with the bean tag? ID and class. Multiple attributes, but two important attributes. Has two important attributes called ID and class. Online people, try to understand. And if you have any query, please let me know. Did you guys understood so far whatever I have explained? Can you give me some reply in the chat box, online people?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Good. Good. If you have any query, please let me know through chat box, or you can also directly speak to me, whatever it is. Okay. Right. Right. Good.
Right.
Good. The other information to you is that so
Tried
from
to read
tomorrow,
many books, sir, but
okay,
was not able to understand this basic thing.
yeah. See,
Thank you.
yeah. So in the, I want to tell you one thing. From tomorrow you will get a new link, guys. This link doesn't work. Okay. So those who are attending like a demo session, so you need to register by today, and tomorrow morning, the link will be a new link. Today evening, a new link will be shared with you. Online people, you need to join that link from tomorrow. Okay. This link doesn't work from tomorrow. Today, whatever the meeting link that you have joined, so this meeting link doesn't work from tomorrow. We will share a new link with you, and you have to join from tomorrow with the new link. Okay.
Sir, it will be updated in portal, right, sir?
It is updated in portal and also will be sent like I think
By mail.
in
Okay.
WhatsApp. Yeah, mail or WhatsApp, whatever.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So guys, let's go ahead. There are two important attributes called what and what attributes now? ID and class attributes. ID and class attributes. Okay, right. So let's have a discussion. And one more thing, how many configuration files we can write in the Spring? Suppose if I'm let's say, okay, I got an opportunity. So I've joined in a company, but they are still using Spring framework only. They are not using Spring Boot and microservices. Their project is a very old project. Let's say 10 years back project. If as long as the project is properly working, client also not interested to change because of the technology is changed. Are you getting my point? Okay. Some kind of projects are there. If their application is properly working, they don't show interest to change their application again to move to the new technology. Are you able to get my point, right? That's why still you can find out some old version projects, some struts projects. Okay, if a government application is properly working, government is not interested to change it to the new technology. Are you able to get my point, right? They don't want to invest again. Because to change the technology, new resources required, new people required who knows the technology. And this application should be migrated to the new technologies. Then there is a cost incurred. So the government is not interested to pay. Applications anyhow working. Okay, let's go on with the existing application. That's why they won't change. Are you able to get my point, right? Still. Okay, right. So coming to the point here, it could be the government, or it could be the universities, or it could be some board like SSC board, otherwise you can say intermediate +2 board or whatever it is. They are not interested because their application is working perfectly. They don't require multiple changes. Okay, right? So obviously they will go with the existing technology, existing version only. Coming to the point, suppose you got an opportunity where that project is an old project, in that still XML only is available, right? Okay, then the question comes here, you will find multiple configuration files because there is no restriction that, remember, in Spring you have to write only one XML file with all the information. Suppose there are many classes are there in the application, there are many classes, you developed many classes as part of the application. If you write all the classes, if you configure them in a one file, finding the bugs is difficult. Or if any few changes are required, then you need to search for the entire XML file where to make the change. A very big file is a complex file, right? That's why what I can do, I can divide. So how many configuration files I can write? No restriction. You can write 2 files, 3 files, 4 files, 5 files, depends on your requirement. There is no restriction that you must write only 2 configuration files for the project. Are you able to get my point? So generally what happens is, if application is completely developed in Spring Framework, then what happens? In one configuration, one layer related configuration will be defined. Like presentation layer configuration, one file. Business layer configuration, one file. Data access layer configuration will be there in another file. Like that, layer wise, generally people create. If you are finding completely the front end, back end, everything developed in Spring, for example. So just I want to tell you that how many XML files we can able to write in a Spring? That depends. It could be one or multiple. So there is no restriction that you must write only one file. There could be multiple files. If you are in development of servlet technology, how many web.xml files we can able to write in the project? Only one web.xml file. We cannot write web1.xml, next web2.xml, next web3.xml. Only one file we have to write. That one file is called what? Web.xml file. That you are going to, you learn in servlet technology, or you are going to learn it. Okay, only one file you have to write there. But what about Spring now? It's not like that. You can able to write multiple files. Your choice, you can write any number of XML files. There's no restriction. Okay, right, good. Coming to the point now. Coming to the point. Okay, we can define one or more configuration files in Spring. We can define one or more configuration files in Spring. Are you able to get my point now? So which means what? It could be one XML or 2 XMLs or 3 XMLs, doesn't matter. These are all the basic information that you must know before we enter. Now, I am writing a sample only. A sample Spring configuration file looks like below. Okay, let me write and then I'll copy paste. Tell me, what is the root tag of writing this XML file? Beans. What is the parent tag? Bean. Beans is root tag. Bean is a parent tag. Bean has an attribute called what? ID. Let's say, for example, I'm writing, everybody, ID is equal to, just I'm writing only. Don't worry about it. Okay, just I'm writing. Okay. For example, bean ID is equal to, let's say, just I'm writing. Only for understanding, I'm taking some other name. Notification manager. I can write side only, but just I'm writing it next. Class is equal to, let's say, com dot pack dot notification manager. Notification manager. Am I clear with this? Bean has attributes called what and what? ID attribute and class attribute. This is called ID, this is called class. I can write side by side, I can write line by line, no problem. ID and class, two attributes are there in the bean tag, right? So what is the fully qualified name? Com dot pack dot notification manager. And inside there some child tags are there. I'm not writing the child tags. Simply I'm writing dash dash. Because later you'll understand what are the child tags comes inside. Are you able to get my point now? Right. Next I'm writing one more bean tag. One more bean tag. What's the attribute now? ID. ID is equal to, let's say, email. Class is equal to com dot pack dot email notification. So what is the ID here? Email. ID can be any name, my choice only. What's the class name? Com dot pack dot email notification. Email notification. Next here, there is some child tags. Child tags we'll discuss later. I'm going to talk immediately, but after discussing Maven. This is bean tag. Did you guys understood now? Right. Like this, we can write multiple bean tags now. Like this, we can multiple bean tags. Let's say I'm writing last bean tag. Bean ID is equal to SMS. Class is equal to com dot pack dot SMS notification. There are some child tags here. Now close the bean tag. Finally, lastly, what we need to close the bean stack. Okay, now you tell me, this is called what file? Spring XML file, also called Spring configuration file. Beans has a bean tag, ID and class are the attributes, ID for unique identification. Am I right or not? Right, this is another bean tag, this is another bean tag. What are the two important attributes of the bean tag? ID and class. ID. Inside the bean tag, there can be child tags. Child tags we'll discuss later, but currently we are only discussing about beans tag and bean tag. Now, what should be the name of this XML file? What should be the name given to this XML file? Do you have any specific name? No, we don't have any specific name. Then what name I should provide for it? Any name of my choice. I can provide any name. Let's say I'm providing the name as config.xml. Config.xml. Any name.xml actually, but I'm writing config.xml. Am I clear with this now? Let us copy paste it. Now you got some basic thing today. How to write the Spring configuration file. You got it right? Now, sure. We want to insert it. We are done. So you got some idea about how to write the Spring configuration file now? Bean tag has what attributes? ID and class attributes. Like this we have discussed about so far. Now we got the information called Spring configuration file. Next. Okay, next. Now we are going to understand who is the Spring container. Who is the Spring container? So far we are discussing Spring container will do this, Spring container will do that, Spring container will inject the dependencies, will manage the objects, creates the objects. We are talking about everything is done by which, who is going to do all these things? Spring container. Now coming to the Spring, in Spring, who is that container? Okay, right? Good. So in Spring, the containers are nothing but, in Spring, the containers are nothing but the implementation classes of Bean Factory interface and application context interface. Which means Spring Framework has provided, I repeat, Spring Framework has provided two types of containers. How many? Two types. One is called Bean Factory container. Second one, application context container. It's very important for the interviews. Whatever I'm explaining so far is very, very important. IOC, loose coupling, tight coupling, right? Dependency injection, dependency lookup, Spring configuration, Spring container, all these are going to play very, very important role for the interviews. In interview, you'll get all these questions only. In interview, you are going to get mostly all these core basic questions only about annotations and all you are going to get. These are all very important. Okay. Now coming to the point. So who is Spring container? Actually, Spring Framework has provided two types of containers. How many types? Two types. One type of container is Bean Factory container. Second type of container is called application context container. Who are this Bean Factory? It is one interface in Spring. Who is application context? Another interface in Spring. Where Bean Factory is a basic container, application context is the advanced container. Container means, first of all, remove something from your mind. Container means I need to download. Okay, I need to download. I need to install by double clicking. Then it is going to be a container. Not like that. Are you able to follow me, right? In Spring container, in Spring, the container means it is not any software that you need to download and install. Okay, it is nothing but one class which is given by Spring only. That class will take care of what? Creating the objects and managing the objects. Are you able to follow me now? When you are writing core Java program, where are you creating the objects? Where are you creating the objects and where are you calling the setter methods for setting the values, or where are you calling the methods of the object and getting the outputs? In main class. Which class? Main class. First, what are you doing? You are creating all your classes. After that, you are also writing one main class. In main class, what are you creating? Public static, void main. One main method you are creating. What are you doing in this main method? You are creating objects using new keyword. Then you are calling the methods. It may be setter methods or getter methods or other methods you are calling them. Are you able to follow me now? Right. So tell me, means nothing but you are managing objects. In which class you are doing this task of creating the objects, calling the methods and managing them? Main class. Are you able to follow me now? Main class. Now, instead of writing this main class in our Spring project, who will take care of this task? Container. Which container will take care? Spring container. Are you able to get my point now? Who is going to take care of this now? Spring container. Of course, main class we will write. I'm not saying that you are not writing main class. Main class we will write. But inside the main class, these things we are not doing. Who will take care? Spring container will take care. Who is that Spring container? The Spring container is also a class. Sorry, who is Spring container? Spring container is also a class. It is a class. It is a class which is implemented from Bean Factory interface. Or it is a class from implemented from application context interface. So tell me, who is a Spring container? It is a class given by Spring Framework which is implemented from Bean Factory interface or application context interface. That's why we say that in Spring there are two types of containers. One type of container is of type Bean factory. Other type of container is of type application context. So totally in Spring, how many types of containers are there? 2 types are there. Who are they? Bean factory container, application context container. If that Spring container class is implemented from Bean factory interface, it is called what type of container? Bean factory container. If that Spring container class is implemented from application context interface, it is called what type of container? Application context container. So finally understand that Spring container means, is it a software that you are going to download and install? No. It's not like a Tomcat server that you are going to download and install. It's not like a Tomcat server, or it is not like a JBoss server that you have to download and install. Just it is a class. It is a class. Very good. So tell me that class is implemented from where? Either Bean factory interface or application context. 2 types given. Actually, Bean factory is the only first type of container given in the Spring version 1.x, in the very Spring first version. In the Spring first version 1.x, Bean factory container was given. And in Spring 2.x onwards, along with Bean factory, new type of container introduced called what? Application context. The reason Bean factory container can only load the information from XML files. From where? XML files, but it cannot read the information from annotations, which means it doesn't support what? Annotations. That's why which type of container also introduced? Application context. This application context can do both the things. What and what? It can load the configuration from XML file, and also it can load the information from annotations. So it supports what? Annotations. There are how many types of Spring containers are available? 2 types. Who are they? Bean factory container and application context container. I told just now, Bean factory and application context both are interfaces. Both are interfaces. So in Spring, Bean factory and interface provided in Spring. Spring framework provided, Spring provided an interface called Bean factory, and its implementation class name is XML Bean factory. This is an interface. This is the implementation class. IMPL class means implementation class. Example. So tell me, what is Bean factory? What is XML Bean factory? Bean factory is an interface. XML Bean factory is its implementation class. Similarly, application context is what? Application context is also an interface. Its implementation class name is class path XML application context. I'm sorry, here the names are very big. I can't do anything. It's not my own framework. Okay, right. What's the class name? Class path XML application context. Another implementation class is also available for this, and that is called file system XML application context. What is it? File system XML application context. There is one more class available called, this is the last class, okay? This is the last class. So there is one more implementation class available called annotation config application context. One is చెప్పి okay, right. Okay, right, good. Try to understand now. Are you getting my point now? Right, okay. So at that time, means I think I started teaching Spring Framework from 2010, almost from 15 years back. Okay, at that time, we have only this, we don't have any annotations. And at interviews also, what is the difference between these 3? These are very important at that time, because we don't have any annotations and all. But now I don't want to talk about differences and all. Just remember, there are 3 classes. Nobody will ask you. Okay, even those guys all don't know about these classes are available. Right. So leave over that. So simply, okay, so tell me how many implementation classes are available? 3. What are the 3? Class path XML application context is one implementation class. File system XML application context is another implementation class. Annotation config application context is one other implementation class. Very good. First 2 First two classes, you can understand they will work with what file? XML file, but the last one is given to work with annotations. So if you are using annotations in the application, then tell me the Spring container should be started by creating an object of which class? Annotation config application context. Our application should start the Spring container. How application starts a Spring container? By creating object. By creating object of what? Implementation class, a class. Okay, if my application using annotations, then my application should start which type of container? Annotation config application context. If I am working with only XML file, but I don't have annotations, then class path XML application context or file system XML application context. What are these three? Implementation classes. These are all implementation classes of which interface? Application context. So totally how many types of Spring containers are there? Two types. In Spring, there are two types of containers. One type of container is called Bean Factory container. Other type of container is called application context. Both are interfaces. Both are interfaces. Very good. And final twist is, the final twist is application context interface is a child interface of Bean Factory only. Okay, application context interface extends Bean Factory. You know, interface to interface is extension. One interface can extend another interface. Application context is an interface which extends what? Bean Factory. Bean Factory is an interface. Application context is also interface. Application context extends Bean Factory. Bean Factory. Are you able to follow me? Right. So, coming to the point. When we are developing Spring Core applications, we are going to start the container. We are going to start the container. But when we enter into Spring Boot, we don't start the container. We don't start the container. Who will start the container? Spring Boot will start the container. Spring container will be started by Spring Boot. To start the container, Spring Boot also will use class. Which class? Last one. Who is the last one? Annotation config. Because in Spring Boot, we can only work with annotations, but we cannot work with XML file. XML configurations are not allowed. Not allowed. XML is almost deprecated. Now today, XML is only used for data transfer. To the data transfer, now XML is only used for what purpose in the real-time projects? Only for data transfer. Even for data transfer also, XML is not used much. In place of that, we are using JSON. Have you heard the word called JSON? JSON stands for JSON. JSON stands for JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JavaScript object. Earlier, XML used for data transfer. Actually, XML used for configuration. Slowly, annotations dominated. XML gone. Now, XML used for only data transfer. That is also gone. Because of what? JSON. That's why nowadays you no need to learn the XML. If you have just, oh, there is an XML is written like this, that knowledge is enough. Nothing to learn much about XML files. JSON is the data transfer format that we are using today. Front and back end are going to receive the data in what format only? JSON. Your React application will send a JSON data to the backend application. Backend application will send a JSON data to the front end application. The data transfer is totally done with the JSON data format only. Are you able to follow me now? Very good. So you got two things today. What are the two things? There are two types of Spring containers are available. Who are the two types of Spring containers? One is called Bean Factory. In Spring, there are two types of containers. I'm talking about types of Spring containers. First of all, who is Spring container? Spring container is a class implemented from an interface. It is not a software to download and install. A Spring container is a class which implements one of the below two interfaces. So we say that there are two types of Spring containers. Okay, na? Right. Tell me, who is the one interface? Bean factory interface. Factory. What is factory? What is the meaning of factory? Normally, what is factory? Factory means what? So many factories, cement factory also, I'm asking you about factory. I'm generally talking about what is factory? Rubber factory, cement factory. Cement factory produces cement. Rubber factory produces rubber. Are able to follow? Are able to get my point or not? Means what is factory? Factory means which produces something. Factory means what? Which produces something. Which produces something is called factory. Go to Kirana shop. Can you call it as a factory? No, it is not producing anything, right? It's selling the products. That's it. It's not producing the product, right? So what is a factory? Factory means which produces something. That is called factory. First of all, keep the word factory very important. I'll take 2-3 minutes, then I'll conclude the class. Okay. See here, guys. I'll talk about this more, the classes, and I'll write next. But just I want to ask you a question. See, I have a method created like this. Public return type is int. Return type is what? Int. There is a method called get age. Okay. Tell me what is the return type of this method? Int. Means it produces. Produces means returns. It produces what value? Integer value. Integer value. Are you able to follow me? Suppose, understand everybody. Public return type void. Return type what? Void. Let's say for example, set age of int age. This dot age is equal to age. What's the return type here? Void. Means it does not produce any value. Am I right or not? Next, I'm writing public return type employee find by ID of int employee number. So I'm writing. What is return type here? Employee. Return type employee means what this method returns? Employee object. Return type employee class means returns what? Employee object. It's producing an object, na? This is called factory method in Java. When can you say that a method has a factory method in Java? If the method is returning object. If a method is returning object, that is called which method? Means what? The method is producing object. Returning is producing, I told you, na? This method is producing what? Object. That's why it is called which method? Factory method. Can I call this method as a factory method? It is producing, but what? Integer value, not object. It is not a factory method. This is also not a factory method because what is return type? Void. But this method produces what? Object. If a method produces an object, we call that method as what? Factory method. Remember that. Factory means what basically? Which produces an object is called factory. In Java, a method which produces an object is called which method? Factory method. That's the meaning of factory method. I'll talk more about this later. For the time being, I can't continue. I want to stop here. Tomorrow, let's see more things. So tomorrow our plan is, first I'll write some statements which are related to Bean factory and application context. After writing that, next I'm not going to talk directly with the programming and all. So tomorrow I'm going to talk about a tool called Maven. Because I told, without discussing Maven, okay, tomorrow and day after tomorrow, 2 days, probably in 1-2 classes is enough. Tomorrow, if not day after tomorrow, okay, in 1-2 classes, I want to complete what? Details about Maven. Because our first application also, we are going to start with what only? Maven only. Because as of now, we have not discussed Maven. Tomorrow, I am unable to tell you the first Spring program. That's why first I want to talk about what? Maven. What is Maven project structure? What is build process? So we are going to understand what is called dependency, what is pom.xml file. Like that, some information is required for you. So all the information I'll share with Maven tomorrow, and tomorrow, day after tomorrow, 1-2 classes will take. Then we are going to start with the application development. After once the first Spring application completed, then I'm going to talk about what is called constructor injection and what is called setter injection. Constructor injection, setter injection, differences between constructor and setter injections, interface injection, circular dependency problem, how to resolve the circular dependency problem. Then after that bean life cycle, then we are going to start with Spring annotations. Okay, this is a process to learn the Spring framework. We'll follow exactly the same process. Okay, thank you. We'll meet tomorrow. Online people, so tomorrow onwards, please join with the new link. This link doesn't work from tomorrow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.